Hey software developers, what is going on? I'm the Savage Coder and this is episode 34. Today we're going to talk about how to architect a React application. And this is a little bit different than the way that you might develop an application traditionally, but it's kind of the next step in learning React in my opinion. It's not just React that works this way. Most client-side web development or SPA frameworks kind of take this same approach, and you'll see why it makes sense as we go through. So we're going to start with a really short presentation, and then we're going to jump right into code and build what we just talked about. So hopefully this is good stuff. Let's see how it works. But first, okay, so let's look at a React application. For this episode, I made kind of an ugly, yes, I'm not the best designer in the world, so kill me. This is going to be kind of a mock-up of an inbox, right? An email program where you have your messages on the left and you have your reading pane, on the right. So taking a look at our ugly little example application, the application exists inside this kind of pink gray frame here. And we have two sides to our application. We have the inbox and the reading pane. And in the inbox, we just have messages. This consists of a subject line and what I like to call a slug. A slug is just kind of the first so many characters of the body, so you can kind of pre-read a couple of things and maybe have some, ellipsis, some ... after it. And then we have all of our other messages that look the same way. When you click on one of these messages on the left, then it brings that up in the reading pane, which has the subject and the body. What I want to do here is I want to figure out how the UI lays out so that I know how I'm going to build this application. And what I like to do is I like to break the application up into parts. And so what I've done here is I have created two kind of rectangles here in blue. One represents the inbox and the other represents the reading pane. And I've kind of drawn an arrow here to show that we're laying these out side by side. We're not going top to bottom. The inbox is not above the reading pane. So in my mind, I'm already thinking grid layout, flexbox layout, something that's going to put two components, if you will, if you're thinking HTML, two divs, one to the left and one to the right. In this inbox, we have these 5 emails, and they're stacked one on top of another. So we could either just put one component after another, or we could put them in a flex box and set the flex direction to column, which would stack them. So how do you decide if you're just going to use a flex box or just stack those components? Well, I look at what's in each of them, and it looks like I have some centered subject in here. I have centered text for my slug. So to me, Flexbox will add this centering and make it really easy for me to do that. And so I probably am going to lean towards Flexbox, although it may not really actually give us benefit once we break this down into individual components, but we'll see as we go. So now that we have our UI figured out, at least at a high level, let's talk about the application architecture. So we have these an inbox component probably, and we have a reading pane component probably. And then within our inbox is a list of repeating emails. And anytime you see repeating data or repeating components, I start thinking that those in themselves could be a component. So my inbox could just be kind of the wrapper around that holds all of my emails, and then the items in the inbox could be their own components that are held by the parent inbox component. That is way, way too many use of the word components.
Oh
So I'm thinking that this reading pane becomes a component, the inbox is a component, and then each of the email items is their own component that lives inside the inbox component. So what would that look like? So that would look like this. We have our inbox component and we have our inbox item components. And the inbox items would actually have the subject and the slug, and they would live the collection of those inside our inbox. And then our reading pane would just show like the selected email for whichever one of these was selected. And then we have our reading pane component here. Now, all of these components, the reading pane component, the inbox item component, the inbox component, all have to live in something, right? In our actual application. So let's represent our application on here as well, which would look something like this. Now I have this blue, light blue, gray, whatever that shows up as, email application, and it contains the inbox component, which contains the item component, and the email application also contains our reading pane. Let's go ahead and break these down into individual component shapes so that we can work with them. So we have our email application, which will probably live in your app.js or TSX in our case, because we're doing TypeScript. We have an inbox component, we have an inbox item component, and we have a reading pane component. Well, this brings up some interesting issues, because what happens if our email application and our other components here need to share some of the same data? Like, what if the email application had to show the total count of emails maybe in the top corner? What if the inbox component had to show a count of how many read and unread emails were in the inbox? And the reading pane definitely needs to show the subject and the body of the email. And the inbox item component needs the subject and the slug. So all of these are coming from the same data, right? A big list of emails. So how do we arrange this application so that everything can have access to the same data? That looks like this, where the application is flowing the data down to the child and grandchildren components. And this is pretty much how you make a React application. You have to kind of look at what you're going to do and what it's going to grow to in the future. And you have to find the highest common parent. And that is the owner of the state. So the way this is going to work is the email application will have all the state. This is the data that can change. This is the data that gets read from an external source, an API, a database, wherever you're getting your data from. Once it has its state, it passes it down as props to the other three components, the two children and the grandchild. And these three components, the children and grandchildren, they receive it as props, which are not mutable, right? You can't change that data. If these children want to change the data, they would ask the parent component to change its state and pass the change back down. And that's kind of how a React app works. You find that common parent of all of the components that need the data, and then that parent is the owner or the source of truth for that data. You can kind of think about this in any type of application. Think maybe of a shopping cart where the number of items in your cart is in the menu bar at the top. You know, you see the total count there, but if you go to the shopping cart page, then the shopping cart also shows the cart data and the number of items in the cart. So because you have to share that between those two, whatever those components are, they would have some kind of a common parent, or they could use some other state maintaining mechanism to make sure that that data is shared out. So I don't want to confuse with that side of things. We're going to get into those state management mechanisms and what your options are there. But for now, we're going to do it manually, and we're just going to pass things down. So let's get into React and into our project and see how to build this application. So we're starting off with where we left off on episode 33. And I think the first thing we're going to do, because we're not really working with these children or anything anymore from that episode, I'm going to go ahead and right click and delete my child.tsx. Let's kind of get rid of everything in between div and /div because we're not using that anymore. We're going to be using useState, so we can leave that, but let's remove the import from mychild. And we'll get rid of this name useState because we're not going to use that. So this is what we're left with. And I'm going to change the class name here. We're just going to name this container because it's going to be the container for our inbox that we're going to build. I also want to clean up the old app CSS. We don't need any of this stuff, so we're going to get rid of all that ugliness. And we will start off with a container. So let's make a container, and we're going to give it a background color of 333, which is fairly dark, and we'll make the foreground color, or just color, white, which is FFF. And we will give it, let's actually not put a height yet. I want to show you how that works. Let me do an npm start here, and maybe I can bring in the browser on part of my screen. So I'm going to shrink this for now. Cool. So we don't see anything here now, but I can go ahead and put in something like hi, and we will see our div row with the black background and the word hi jammed up in the corner there. So inside, I'm going to get rid of hi, of course, and inside our div, I want to make two other divs. I want my left, like the left inbox side, and then I want to make the reading pane, right? Reading pane. And if we look at those now, they're stacked one on top of another, which is not what I want. So I want to create a flexbox in my container. So let me close that index file, and I'm going to go into my app CSS, and let's fill out a little bit of the container there. So I'm going to do display flex. And now they are aligned in a row instead of one on top of another. And I want this to fill the page. So I'm going to go and I'm going to put in some CSS for the body itself. And in there, maybe what we'll do is we'll move the background color and the font color into body so that it applies for the whole body, not just for this container element. So the next thing I want is to make sure that all the content in my site can take up the full height of this page. So I'm going to tell the body that everything in it should have a height of 100 Van Halens. No, not Van Halen. View height. The view height of whatever the height of my device is. And I can save that, but if I go here and I put a border, we'll make that border red. You can see that even though I told it the height of the body is 100% of the view height, the div itself still only takes up the height of the content that's in it. So I also want to move this height and copy that down into my container so that it takes up the whole height. Now I'm going to get rid of the red border here, and that'll get rid. Since my border is 1 pixel, there's a pixel on top and a pixel on bottom, which is 2 pixels, and that's enough to give us that scroll bar. So make sure that if you're using the 100 VH that you take that into account if you have any borders. Cool. So we're getting closer, right? So let's go back to our app TSX and let's start filling out some of what goes in this left inbox. So I'm going to put in here, I'm going to make this a class name of, we'll call it left container. This one we'll call class name, we'll call it right container. We'll leave the word reading pane in there for now. And inside our container, we're going to have kind of another div that wraps our inbox, and we'll just call that the inbox container. It's a lot of containers. And in here, we'll have our inbox items. So let me save that. And so all we see here are inbox items, because these divs are just in classes that don't apply anything. These don't even exist yet. So really, it's just an empty div that just has a div with text in it. So it doesn't look a whole lot different yet. But let's go and fill in this left container. So I'm going to create a left container. And what I want in here, first let's put in some padding. Right? Kind of separate out, start to kind of visualize our inbox there. And so we want it away from the top and away from the left, and we'll put some padding all around it. And then let's say that the min width is going to be 250 pixels. And so now we kind of, we get a separation of our inbox from our reading pane. And then we also had our inbox container, and the inbox container, we said in our slides in the beginning that they were going to be stacked and we were going to probably use flex. So let's go ahead and just put that it's flex and that the flex direction is column. So not going to make any difference right now because there is really nothing in there but one line of text. So even though now inbox items is technically in a column, there's only one item, so that's all we see. So I think the next thing that we want to do is we want to kind of create one of our items here. Right? So the items will live inside the container. So let's just simulate one of these. And I like to do them in empty divs to begin with. So let's just say that the subject would be here, and we'll call it the slug will be here, right? And awesome visual effects. That was an accident. So, and then I'm going to wrap this into another div. And the reason I'm doing this is just so that I can think of this div as my email. And imagine if I put this in a loop that I can put my inbox items as div, 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 div. So let's take a look at that. So there's our subject and slug. Notice they're one on top of the other because divs do land one on top of the other. And even though I have flex in here, it's only applying to this div. So if I had two of them, then you could see that they are one on top of another. So we'll have to put some styling on these divs that make up these inbox items just to kind of make that look better. But let's hold off on that. All right. And then on the reading pane, we could kind of do the same thing where the reading pane has a selected email. So I'll make a container and then I'll make a div that has maybe subject and then, whatever, maybe subject here. That is not an HTML tag or I guess I can't do that way. Let's just, we'll just put it in quotes. And then that was a colon. And then Shift-Alt down arrow duplicates the line. And then I can just say that the body of the email, and obviously this is ugly. This would not look this way, but we're really talking about architecture here, not about design. So, which is a good thing for me. So now we have our subject and our body here, but you can see it's hanging out way at the top of the page. So let's go ahead and fix this right container and make it look like something. Right container. And we're going to add the same 20 pixel padding. And so that looks a little bit better. The one thing that I am a little concerned about here is the size of this container. So I'm going to throw a border on it quickly. We'll just make this one red for a minute. So that kind of is okay. The problem is, notice that our column is only as wide as the content. I kind of want, you know, if you think about like Outlook or one of the popular email clients, the inbox is on the left and the reading pane takes up the rest of the width. So let's go ahead and stretch this item. Since we're in a flex box here, I can just say flex 1 and it will stretch all the way over. So let's do that. If you don't know how Flexbox works, check out the card above where I show you Flexbox. And so, oops, let me put that border back just to verify. Okay, that's better. See, now we've got the full width here, and then the rest of it belongs to this inbox. And that'll look a little better when, you know, this thing grows bigger, right? Like that looks more normal. I think we should have some headings here. So maybe underneath the left container in the left side, let's add a div. And we'll give it a class name so that we can style it. We'll call this the inbox container because it's going to contain the inbox itself. And this is just going to say inbox. And that way we'll get a little heading up there. So let's style our inbox container so that it looks like a heading. Let's go ahead. I don't think we need this inner one actually, because we have our divs that'll be inside of our inbox container. So I'm going to get rid of this one. Let's see what that does. Yeah. Cool. So let's get rid of this red border while we're at it, and CSS under right container. And I think we'll be okay here as long as we can fix what these look like. So if we look at our individual emails, I think this becomes like the container for the item. So I'm going to call this the item container. Bet you couldn't have guessed that. And then that will style out the subject and the body and the slug, I mean. So let's go and fix the item container. I don't think we have one of those yet. And what we're going to do for our item container is, let's see, we want to, we definitely want to flex those because they're going to go centered in their own item. So let's do a display flex. Now that's going to put them, if I save now, that's going to put it next to each other, which is wrong, right? We don't want subject slug next to each other. So we're going to do a flex direction of column. That'll put them back on top of each other. And then I'm going to put some more stuff there, but let's add padding 20 pixels. That'll space those out. And then in here, let's align items center. And we'll also justify content center. So if we center, then they'll go ahead and center inside. And I think if we just put a border around it now, and we will go with white. So that makes a nice inbox. And so if we added that same class to that one, then they would both have that. So let's go ahead and add a hover so that if we hover the item container that it kind of highlights. I think that'll add a little nicer look. So to do that, we're just going to name the same class, item container, and then we're going to add :hover to it. And so these will only take effect when we hover that item. So let's change the background color if we hover it, and we'll make that a darker color, like a gray. And then we will look at the cursor. Let's make that a pointer so that we get that little hand. And so right now, before I save, you see the cursor is just an arrow. And when I save, the cursor now becomes a hand, and it now looks like we can click on these to display the correct body here. So this is enough for us. I think the only thing we might want to do is we might want to add some kind of a heading like we did for this inbox. We can put under the right container maybe like email, I don't know, email view or something like that. And then we can make this the email container. I love that word, container. And in our email container, we could just add, so let's do some margin bottom and see if that's too much. Now that looks good enough. Okay, so we have our application. This is what it's going to look like. Not very pretty, but
Ew.
It will allow me to show you how these all fit together as components. So let's do that now. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make a folder. And so we'll just pick something inside source, just pick anything. And I'm going to add a folder here, and the folder is going to be called components. And we're also going to have to, let's make another folder while we're here. Let's click on any file in source and add another folder called models. And this is going to be the model of our email, what an email actually looks like, so that we can pass one of those or an array of one of those around to our components once we have our emails. So that brings me to the first thing, which is let's go ahead and create our emails. And so I'm just going to do a const, and we'll call them emails. And that's just going to equal some array of something, right? So what is an email going to look like? Well, an email is an object, so we'll make our curly braces. It's going to have an ID of 1, and this is just simulating getting email from some outside service. And then we'll just say that this is subject number 1, and then we will have our body. That's fine. We can use body 1 for now. And that's it. That's, oops, I put a period here instead of a comma. So that's an email. So if I want to now use Copilot, I'm sure it's going to suggest the correct stuff for me here. Okay, so there's my 5 emails. So now that I know what an email looks like, let's go ahead and create an interface for this. So I'm going to select models. I'm going to right click new file, or you can click new file. And I'm going to call this class an email.ts. And in here, I'm just going to export interface. And don't worry about that error. Email. And this is going to have it already knows what I'm going for. No, it doesn't. It has an ID, but then I want a subject, and then I want a body. So that's the same as, you know, what we just made here. ID subject body. ID subject body. We have ID subject body. ID is a number. The other 2 are strings. So that's going to be exported as email. So if we want to use it in this file, we import what we exported over there. So import email from, and it's not /email. From here in app.tsx, it's inside models, so /models/email. And now that I have the email here, I can go to the end of my emails array, and I can tell TypeScript that this is as email array. Okay, so saving clears up our error here. We have our email data. So now let's break this stuff up into individual components. So this guy, our app, owns the data, right? So this is going to be a constant or part of, state if we wanted it to be. And we're going to pass this down as props to these other components. So my first component is going to be an inbox item. So I'll make a new file and we'll call this InboxItem.tsx. And I'm going to use the ES6 add-in for VS Code that I've used all along. TSRAFCE. And the only difference with the underscore not being there is that it puts this React line in, which we don't need right now. And so saving that will give us our inbox item. So if we go back to our app.tsx and we look at what an item is, it's just this item container. And that's why I put it in a div so I could grab it easily. So I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to cut this, kind of copy it while I erase it. And then I'm just going to get rid of the other one. And we'll just say like, item goes here. And I'll just do Control/ just to comment where they go. That way I don't have to go searching through my document tree here to find where it goes. This thing could be huge in some larger applications. And then I'm going to replace this div inside this inbox item that I'm creating. I'm going to make it my inbox item. So it doesn't do anything. It's still just hard-coded subject and slug. And what I can do now is I can come back here and replace this item goes here with my inbox item. And if I hit tab at this point, it will bring in the import for that component. And now I have a child component with one of these in there. Well, I have an array here, so why don't we loop through this array and create one of these inbox items for each item in the array. Okay, before we loop through these guys, let's set up, just to keep with our slides that we started with, let's take this constant of emails and use this as the default value for some state. Because this is our parent component. So I want to say constant, and we'll call it emails, and then set emails is equal to use state. And use state is going to have, it's going to hold an email array. And the default for that will be capital emails. So what this does is it sets up some state. It says that the type of value that we're going to store in this variable emails is going to be an array of email, and that's the model that we made over here. So it's going to be an array or many of these, ID, subject, and body. And I created an array of ID, subject, and body in a constant called emails, and that's what I'm feeding in here. So when we first run it, emails will equal what's in here. And then if I want to change what's in this state, what's in this emails value, then I would just call the set emails function and pass it the new value, and then that would get stored in emails. So now that we have our state of emails, let's go and make one inbox item for each email in our defaulted list of emails that we created. So I want to just say emails.map. And I'm going to call each one of these emails an inbox item, just because I don't want to have emails, email array, email, and then lowercase emails here, and then email here. So I'm just going to call this thing for each one of these emails when we go through them one at a time. Just call each one of them inbox item. And then what I'm going to do is in this loop, I'm going to return an inbox item. Right? And then that's it. So if I save that, now you can see for each of the 5 emails that I have here in my data, I have rendered an inbox component for each one. And one thing we do have to do when we do a map, if we looked at our developer tools here, you're going to see an error on the console tab saying that each child should have a key. And because I have an ID on each one of these, I'm just going to say key equals, and we'll do inbox item.key. .id. Right, because each one of these one at a time is going to be an inbox item, so read the ID. So this will have ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then once we save that, that warning should go away. There we go, it's gone. The next thing we want to do is we want to make this not say subject slug, right? We want it to be the actual data from our data that we're getting. So I want to pass in a property. I want to pass some of this data down into each inbox item. And I don't think that each inbox item needs the whole list of all the emails, because each item is only really, all it cares about is itself, what it's going to show. So what I want to really pass in there is this inbox item that we're working with. So I'm going to make a prop called inbox item, and we'll say it equals the inbox item. So this is going to be a new prop that we're going to create in a second. And what we're saying is, as you go through this emails array, you go through each one at a time. All right, so if we're on number 1, I'm going to create an inbox item. I'm going to make the key number 1, because that's the ID of the first one, right, as we go through this one at a time. And then I want to pass that particular item, the whole item, to the inbox. And the item contains ID 1, subject, and body. That's all that we're passing there in. And so now I just got to create an inbox item property in my inbox item component. So up here where it says type props, what I want to tell it is I want to pass in an inbox item, which is an email. And if I hit control dot, I can add the import. And so now it knows the data type for an inbox item, which is what's getting passed in. And I could go here and instead of saying subject, I could open up curly braces and say props dot inbox item dot subject, right? That would work. If I save there, you can see the subjects come in, but that's kind of a lot to type, right? Because I'm getting to props is the name of the variable, then I got to go to inbox item and then actually get the subject. So I can actually destructure my props and go right to the inbox item. If I get rid of the variable and do a destructure on it, I can just say, go ahead and destructure out of the props that's getting passed into me the actual inbox item. Now I don't need props dot because I destructured it. And if I hit save, that won't make any change here. We'll be good. And the next thing I want to do is get rid of the slug, so I can do inbox item dot body. Now this is going to give me the whole body, which I don't want. I only want part of the slug. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab some lorem ipsum here, and let's just generate some. And I'm not going to make it real long, but I'll grab like a sentence, and let's go ahead and replace body 1 with some fake text. Cool. So let's close that tab. And if I save now, you can see that this is going to be a problem. I don't know why we lost. There we go. So we don't want this. We just want a little kind of slug there for our body. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to do a slice on it. So if I did body.slice and start at the first character and don't go any more than 10 characters. And then after that, I actually want to do like a ... So I could do that. Or the cleaner way to do that would be to, inside these curly braces, just use some interpolation, put some backticks inside the curly braces, and then put a $curly around the JavaScript here, and then outside of that, do my ... So everything that's inside these quotes is what's going to get output. If it's not inside $curly brace to curly brace, like these 3 dots aren't, they'll just be literal text. And so now it's going to shorten it up to, looks like, why didn't body 2, 3, and 4 save? Oh, that's just crazy. Oh, because I put it on the subject, not the body. Well, here's how I'm going to fix that. Subject, what do we got? Subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, 4, 5. Subject. Oh, always mistakes. So let's go ahead and rename this body. And let's make all of these body. Good. And then subject will be the subject ones. So kind of a quick fix. Are we good here?
Well,
Subject,
it's about time.
Yeah. So now you get a little picture of your slug, and all we got to do is, if we click on it, we want to load that email into the email pane, the email view. So let's go back to our app here. So this is nice and clean. We've got our app and we've got our inbox item. If we wanted to, we could make a component out of this inbox container and we could pass it the full set of emails if we wanted to do like a count, or we could even just pass it emails.length and use a count there. That's your homework if you want to try that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to turn this email into another component. So I'm going to right click components, new file, and we're going to call this the email view.tsx. I'm going to do a tsrafce, and we have our email view. So let's cut our email out of our email container, and we're going to replace this div actually with the actual div of the email. And then inside the email container, after the title, we'll go ahead and put the email view component. I'll hit tab and we'll close that, and then we get back what we had. So I think you can guess what's going to happen here is we want to select one of these, and when we click on them, we want to kind of set that as the selected email. So we need some state to remember which one gets selected. So we're just going to do a const, and we'll just call it selected email, and set selected email, and that's going to equal use state. It's going to just hold a single email. It's not HTML. And by default, it has nothing, but we'll just say it's an email. And let me collapse this so you can see that. Cool. So now we have some state that can hold an email. It starts off empty, and we'll just pass the selected email to this email view. So we'll say selected email is equal to the actual selected email. And so now we've got to tell this email view, hey, you've got a property called selected email that's going to pass you an email, right? A type email. So let's go into our email view, into our props, and we're going to be passed a selected email, which is going to be of type email. Control.enter, we'll add the import, and then we will also destructure here like we did before, selected email, and then subject will be curly braces and selected email dot subject. And then for the body, we will put curly braces, selected email dot body. All right. If we hit save, we have nothing by default because nothing is selected. When we click on this inbox item, we want to set the selected email. So if I put an on-click in inbox item, we'll have to go into inbox item, create an on-click, and then raise that event back up to the parent so that we can do something with it, which is kind of a pain. So for this, I think it's easier to just add a div container around our inbox item. That won't change anything in the display because divs don't display anything, but a div can easily get an on-click added to it. And what we want to do when we click on it is we want to, show email. So we just need to make a method called show email. If I just do it like this, show email, we'll call a method and it'll pass the, event, the thing that we normally do like e.target.value. But I don't want the target's value. This div doesn't do me any good. So what I actually want to do is I want to capture the on-click event. And now I can just call JavaScript methods. So I can just call this and I can put InboxItem.id in here now. And then when I create my const show email method equals, and now I can say that you're going to receive an ID that's a number and do whatever you want inside this method. If I didn't put this open close paren with the arrow, then I wouldn't be able to pass this number in. So really what I want to do here is I want to find the selected email and then I want to set the selected email. All I'm getting in is the ID number. So what I want to do there is let's just make a constant called email by ID, and we'll make it equal to the emails array, which is our state variable up here. And we'll do a find on it. So find me and go through each one, and if e.id is equal to the ID that we're passing in, then that's the one. And then I can just say if email by ID, so if we found it, then go ahead and call set selected email and pass in the email by ID. So really quick again, go through each email in the emails array in our state and go through each one and compare. E now is each one at a time. So compare each email in that array, compare its ID to the ID that we passed in from down here, which is the one that was on-clicked, the one we clicked on. So if number 5 is in here, it'll go through and say, well, go through them one at a time. If e.id is 1, does that equal 5 that we clicked? No. And it'll do that each time until it says, oh yeah, this one is number 5. Go ahead and save that email into this variable. And as long as we find one, once we go through all of them, go ahead and set the selected email. And once we call set selected email, that's going to update selected email, the value, right, the variable. And since we're using that variable in our render, in our return to this child component, it will change the value and re-render this child component with the new value. So when we first do this and don't click on anything, this value starts off empty, right? We just defaulted it to empty. But then when we click on something, we run this method that finds, right? It finds the email that we clicked on, sets the selected one, and re-renders the view, which is going to update this data, and then it's going to show this stuff with the real data from the one we clicked on. So let's hit save. We click on number 1, we get subject 1 with our lorem ipsum, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so here we have our parent application, our app.tsx, using 2 children, siblings, with the same data, but the parent owns the data. And like I said, we could easily turn this inbox. We could put like a count up here of the total number by just turning this into a parent component. And inside that component we create is where this inbox item would go. And all this code that's in here, right, would just live inside the parent component. All right, let's run over. We'll do that real quick. It shouldn't take long. So we're just going to go into components. We're going to make a new file, and we're going to call it inbox component.tsx. And we're going to do a tsra tab. Okay. And then I'm going to go back here, and it's going to contain this whole div right here, which includes the title and the child inbox and the loop and everything. So I'm going to cut this with a Control X. Remember, it's going to go right inside left container. And I'm going to replace this inbox with this. So there's some things that are missing in here now. And so the first thing is any data that we need, like emails, that's got to come in as a prop now. So anything we need for data has got to come in as a prop. So let's make a prop called emails, and it's going to be an email array. Control dot add import. Then we can put emails destructured in here, right? Just like we did before. So now emails is happy. All this should be happy. We're calling on click the show email method. So let's go back and grab that show email method, and we're going to move that inside this inbox component as well. So we'll just copy that in here. Now, set selected email is only for this inbox item now, right? If we look back at our parent component, all we're going to be doing here is we're going to be, as a matter of fact, let's add this inbox component back in here so we can kind of, what did we call it? Inbox component. Okay. Right, so if we can just visualize this, the inbox component's going to get some stuff. We'll pass it some stuff. And then we have our email view, which needs to know the selected email. I wasn't going to get into this subject till the next episode, but I guess I have no choice because I went down this road. But basically what we're saying is the selected email needs to get passed to this email view in this app TSX in the parent application. But the actual selection, when we click on an inbox item, that's now happening inside this inbox component, right? The inbox component now has this div with the on click. And so what we need to do from this child is we need to tell the parent, hey, the selected email has changed. And we need a way to update this selected email in the parent so that it can be changed for this other email view that needs it. So if we change something inside a child that a sibling needs, that needs to get notified from the child back up to this level at the parent. The parent will change it. And then when the change happens, it'll go back down into the email view. Let's go ahead and satisfy this. So we don't have a set selected email. What we're going to do in our props, we're going to name a function, and we're going to call it, we'll call it selected email changed. And we're going to pass back the new ID, which is a number. So you can think about this as kind of an event that happens where it's going to pass the ID back. And we put void at the end just because there's no actual return type. The data will be inside parens. And so now we can call this method if we expose it in our destructured stuff here. And so instead of calling set selected email, we just want to raise this kind of event. So what happens here is we were finding the whole email and setting the selected email. So we have a choice. We can either pass back the ID or we can pass back the actual email. We can pass the whole thing back. Let's do that. So we'll just pass back the email, and that is no longer a number, it's type email. And now, once we find our email in our emails, right, we do our emails find, and we just pass back the one to the parent with this argument email. Our inbox item, we need to import that. I'm not sure what this is complaining about. Let's save. Undetermined JSX and app.tsx. Oh, because now we have props here, right? We have our emails, and we have, so let's do that. Let's set those up. So I need emails is equal to, and in this case, emails is where our list is coming from. And then we also have a selected email changed, and that's going to equal, we'll just say set selected email, and this is going to return us an email. Let's move that to the next line so you can see, and then we just want to pass the email. So when the inbox component gets clicked, it calls show email. Show email just finds the right email and sets the selected email changed. So maybe show email isn't the greatest word or name anymore. Maybe we should call that set email. So I'm going to hit F2, set email, and update that name. So now I think we are good. What is your problem here? Div has no, so we messed up some of the divs here. Okay, let's open, close, open. Oh, the left container has no closing div. I must have deleted that. All right. So now we're even here. And now we have an error in our inbox component. Unexpected token on emails.map. Did I do the same thing here? Okay, yeah. So here I have two divs, right? I have this div, and then I have this thing that returns stuff within. There's the extra div that I wasn't supposed to remove. So even if I remove this, it's not good because this return needs to return one element, and there's an open and close. That's my one element. So I like it the way it is. I'm just going to go ahead and put an empty open close at the beginning and at the end and kind of make that a partial.
Freaking awesome!
And so now we are back to working and everything is happy. If I go back now to my inbox component, I can put inbox dash and then, or let's do this. Let's put parens, and then inside the parens, I'm going to put emails.length. Right, so now it says inbox 5. So I'm now sharing from my top level app all of the emails in the app to inbox component. And inside inbox component, I loop through those emails one at a time. I grab the length of all of them for the count. And then one at a time, I create a grandchild, which is an inbox item. And each inbox item will display. And then if I click one of those inbox items, I'm grabbing the ID, I'm looking up the email by ID, and I'm calling set email changed from this inbox component. That raises the event selected email changed, right? Because what I'm doing here is I'm calling this method back through the props, back up the tree. And once I go back up the tree, I can fire this event, which passes the email, and it calls set selected email, which is my use state that updates the email. When this value changes, the email view is notified, and it also updates. And so there you have it. So this episode was a little longer than normal, but I hope it gave you a really good idea of how we can use React to work with our children and our grandchildren, and you can kind of start looking at applications and sites as if they were modules and how you could break those up from the UI with how you might lay it out with Flexbox, and then you get into the actual design of the components individually and how they would communicate with each other, even if they had to share data going down, or maybe notify, hey Pops, I need you to change something and send it back to me when you're done. And let everybody else in the app know that this has changed. And so we just saw how to do that. So be sure to check out the GitHub and, walk through it. Go right click, inspect, go to sources really quickly. We're not going to really do it here, but just when you're on your own, if you want to, you can right click and inspect, if I can do it, inspect, and go to sources, and then look at maybe the child component or the app. You just control P and you can type app.tsx, and once you see it, you just hit enter, and there's our code, right? So if I wanted to look at the inbox component, or if I wanted to see when this thing gets fired, I could do control P and do inbox component. I could pull that up, and then when I on-click and set an email, I could put a breakpoint here, and when I click on one of these, I can look at the email ID, right? The ID that's passed in was 2, and I can actually see this, and if I go back to app, and then I put a breakpoint on line 43, we should see this set email changed. If I hit run here, you can see that it's getting sent back with the email that we just selected, and it's going to call set selected email, which is then going to re-render my email view. You also can use these tools to look at your elements. You can right click anything and do inspect, and go ahead and show the body, show anything else that you want. And as you click on those, as long as you get rid of all of your breakpoints, right? As you click on those, you can see what updates in the UI here. So a couple of things are updating, but nothing else in the UI is updating that doesn't need to update. There's nothing in our left container that updates unless I hover, right? Then just a style is changing, but nothing is changing that doesn't need to change. So really cool stuff. Hope that was really informative. Hope that you get charged up to do this stuff. This makes me just want to put my head down and write something awesome. So that's what you should do. Write something awesome. If you have any questions, please let me know in the description, or you can hit me up in social media. That stuff is in the description as well. If you liked this or found it helpful, please subscribe. Also check out my shorts. They're 1 minute long shorts that I just put my first one out. A really cool tip on adding font ligatures. So check that out. That is on YouTube Shorts. It's on Instagram. It's on Facebook Reels. It's on TikTok. So I hope you like those. And as always, practice, 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 and I'll see you soon online.